And I will turn to Mr. Miller for any closing remarks that he might have.
First, Mr. Chairman, if I might, thank you. Some housekeeping. I'd like to submit for the record the testimony of the National PTA President raising serious concerns about the legislation and letters in opposition to the legislation that have been sent to the committee. Also, the report, Moving Your Numbers, a report on how districts are using test and accountability to increase student performance for students with disabilities. And I'd also like to recognize many of the parents who are in the audience today, who are the parents of students with disabilities who have serious concerns about this legislation.
Mr. Of course, without objection, all of that.
Thank you. Mr. Kilday's comments reminded me when we were writing No Child Left Behind, we inserted the idea that 95% of the students would have to take the test. And geez, people went crazy. They went haywire. Districts went, states, districts, everybody went haywire. But the fact of the matter was that we know at that time that students were counseled, parents were counseled that you might want to, if you need a doctor's appointment, we're only testing today, so take your son or daughter to the doctor. Field trips were organized to take selected groups of students off campus during testing. Students with parents with students with disabilities were told, you're only going to embarrass your student. This is terrible. They can't, he or she cannot do this work. You're going to embarrass them in the class. Why don't you keep them home or feel free to take them, what have you. And that's why we have some of these guideposts. They seem onerous or what have you, but the fact of the matter is this is about every child in our system. And when I came to Congress, if you were in a wheelchair, you could not get into the classrooms. You were prohibited. It's not that you couldn't physically get in the classroom. You were prohibited from going into those classrooms. The report of children out of school. If you were Hispanic in this country, your chances of suspension, I don't know how many times. You were, in fact, in many instances, if you were an English learner and a Hispanic English learner, you weren't allowed in the school. I mean, these are where we come from. It's not that way today. Everybody here sitting here today say, I don't recognize what you're talking about. But the fact is today, when we know that tests were manipulated, governors who wanted to show, were afraid about that third year of progress, or a superintendent wanted to change the exam so they could get a reset and start over, and we know that we whipped the top 25% of the students in this nation harder and harder and harder so we could say that average school had improved. We never asked the question about what happened to the students below average, and hence No Child Left Behind. Now as we reconstruct it, and now as we see this if you will, educational spring about the understanding of accountability, about the understanding of real assessments and what they can tell, the in-depth, get rid of these check a box, check a bubble here, that all has to go by the wayside. It is yesterday, as the kids would say. And you see states, you see districts embracing it, and they're doing it under current law. But they shouldn't be the exception. And we struggle, as Mr. Balfa says, how do we replicate this? How do we transmit this? How do we translate this to other districts? People tell us you can't test art, and yet you're saying your students are tested. People say I only teach to the test. That was the easy way out. I visit schools all over this country, schools that are 100%, almost 100% English learning. The test, as you say, is incidental. It's like that's what it is. We teach. We teach, and they learn. But somehow that's considered a freak show, because everybody else said we can only teach to the test. Somehow you can't cross over in some schools. I've been on Indian reservations where English is taught, and it's taught about the history of the tribe, the culture of the tribe, the biology of the tribe is incorporated, the reservation, the assets are all integrated. I see that in schools all over my district, but not in every school. No, this is the time to learn to read. You can't read this in history. Now again, this sounds foreign if you're out there on the horizon, right? This is nobody would embrace this. But there's a lot of evidence that unless there's some sideboards, as you say, on this, that this happens. It happens. We know that if, the suggestion is, well, let's just leave it to an IEP. Let's not have a standard. Let's not require them to participate in the assessments for students with disabilities. We know the tension that exists inside a school when a student is recommended for additional educational opportunity, recommended that he or she should be able to take the exam. And we see it in my state playing out where we used to fool around with the N, the N factor, N size. Now it's the 1% assessment. and the dramatic rise in the number of students who are sent into those alternative assessments, we know what goes on out there. And we want to encourage and get out of the way, and I think that's what the Secretary tried to say with waivers, get out of the way of the states and the systems that want to ride out on the horizon, want to go to the future, don't want to be held back by a bubble test or that static measure of how this district is doing. But if we're going to have growth, it's got to be growth somewhere. We tried it in my state. First of all, it became growth to nowhere. You could end up worse off at the end of the year, and yet you could meet the standard. That got rid of that. We're now getting on track. So this is what this contest is about. It's not about federal or state. It's about making sure that that federal investment is, in fact, yielding a return for the entire society. And you know, we see dramatic changes in the participation and the improvement of students with disabilities in these exams. They're growing in some cases faster than the general population in terms of their improvements, in terms of the size of the improvements that are being made. That doesn't mean every child will be able to do that. That doesn't mean every child, the classroom will be an appropriate place. But we do see what early intervention means. So do we withhold early intervention when it reduces the number of children in special education, when it provides them an educational opportunity that would not otherwise be there? But a lot of parts of the country, they're not interested. A lot of districts aren't interested in that early intervention. They don't see how they can do it. They don't see how it can be done. And yet we see it, the return on that investment. This is really about maximizing the return on the investment of that federal dollar. And to go to places where you've made this decision ahead of us, that this district has to be different, this state has to be different. We've now got to move. I remember when Colorado suggested for the first time that they were going to monitor and keep track of where the migrant children were moving in the states. People went, oh, Jesus, don't do that. Well, they realized that those students were showing up in schools. And if you didn't know where they came from and you didn't know what they had accomplished, how did you deal with them when they walked through your front door because their parents moved to a new locality? Now we consider that to be quite proper. Except in this bill, we kind of go back about what are we doing for migrants? And yet they're a very important part of your economy and certainly our economy and the Southeast economy and the Northeast economy. So this is really about that reevaluation, that real assessment of what we should be doing. But it's not about giving up on those sideboards to keep it moving forward. And because we saw what happened when we didn't address graduation rates. We saw what happened. And those children had paid a price. We now see those children borrowing money for remedial education at community colleges and state college systems. How the hell can we justify a system where a graduate of high school has to borrow money to learn how to read at the 12th grade level? You know, we got to have a conversation with that family, and we got to have a conversation with that school district. And we got to enable people to do that. I mean, this just makes no sense in this day and age when families are under this kind of struggle and the opportunities for those young people when they complete their high school education. I mean, we give a high school exam in California, an exit exam from high school, because there used to be a lot of patter in this town about we have students graduating from high school who can't read the diploma. So we put in, you know, people put in an exit exam. In California, when you graduate from 12th grade, we demand to know whether or not you can do 8th grade math and 10th grade reading. I want to know what the hell you did in your junior and senior year if that's the test. We could save taxpayers money by giving it in 10th grade and letting you go. See what's going on in these systems? Exit exam, exit exam. Like this is the measure. It just doesn't measure the right thing. And that's not in the interest of our economy. It's not in the interest of the state school board. It's not in the interest of the governor. That's why we have one of the greatest things about No Child Left Behind. It turned on the lights. And now if you think you want to run for a higher office, you better be concerned about your local school district. If you're a mayor, if you're a governor, if you're a superintendent, because I don't agree with the characterizations of these school systems under No Child Left Behind, and that's a big driving force for what we're trying to change here. But that's the reality for those families. And I think they'll want to know how you're looking at this. I really appreciate this testimony today. I think it's been very, very important. I also believe that it also makes a case for substantial changes in the legislation that's before us. I hope we can accomplish them. Thank you very much.